people leaving, people. Did any of the reactions in the community surprise you?
I don't know. I can understand people being very nervous about something they didn't understand, and we didn't understand, and there was so much misinformation being given all the time. I don't blame the media for that particularly, but they would grasp on any piece of news that came out, and so much of it was distorted and blown up way out of proportion. And it didn't reassure people, it just made it worse. I think it's always better to know exactly, and I wish that the people at the island had been more forthright and really told what was wrong at the beginning. I was angry after I found out that they knew at 4 o'clock in the morning that there was a major problem. And because the children waited at bus stops, they came to, they didn't know how much of a problem there was in the area, in the environment. And people came to school, people went to work. I took the children out for recess, not knowing. And so I was really angry about that more than anything. Everybody was anxious. I was anxious too. You couldn't help but be worried. The one day there was blown all over the world that there was a big hydrogen bubble building, and I guess there was, and there was talk of the possibility of it exploding, which was not a possibility apparently. I still don't understand anything about nuclear power, but they say that this would never have happened. But that was going out, that information was going out everywhere. And so in people's minds, I think they could just see the whole area being decimated, and you just didn't know what to do. So in that sense, now the people, I talked to a businessman downtown in Middletown, and he said that the reporters picked people who were running around and looking frantic and disregarded those who were not. And none of that was put on the news. But then maybe that was not where the story was. President and Mrs. Carter came and walked through the island somewhere, I guess, to try to reassure people. But I don't know that that was too reassuring to most people by that time.
Did the accident change the way you feel about the way the press works or the authorities?
I have very mixed feelings today about the press and the media. There's such an invasion of privacy today that I think some things would be better not being known to the general public. And I think something is going to have to change somewhere in this regard. But I look at most stories now with a questioning eye and think, well, now. And besides, if you go back a few years, so many things were put out as being dangerous to your health, and then it completely changes. Sugar, coffee, butter, now oleo, now they say, well, oleo might be just as bad. And, this over the years is a continuing thing. So now I don't pay attention to any of that because I'm already skinny. But I do look at the news with a questioning eye. I think a lot of people do.
From the area?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that anybody quite believes anything that 3 Mile Island says. I'm not sure I do. They keep trying. They put out newsletters, reassuring reports, and then all of a sudden in the paper you will see that they were cited for this safety measure or that thing, and I don't know how important those things are, but I think, well, they're still being cited after all of this time and supposed to be extremely careful and all of that. So it does raise questions in my mind, not just about this one particularly, 3 Mile Island, but all over the country. If you look at the map of the United States and look at the nuclear reactors that are in the area that go from north to south all across the mid-section of the country and the west. So it could be very bad. And of course there's always a problem with the waste. Before they built the island, and they had a township meeting, or no, not a township, school, excuse me, a meeting at the school. And a very nice young man talked to the people about 3 Mile Island, what advantages it would bring and what it would mean and this and that. And everybody just listened because nobody really understood just what was involved. And afterwards he asked for questions. There were a few. And I asked them what they planned to do with the waste. And he said, well, that was not their problem. That was the government would take care of that problem. And it was a more naive time. And so if somebody said, well, the government will take care of that, that you figured that they had some plan to take care of that. And it still has not been resolved. And radioactive waste, of course, a tremendous problem. So I kind of look askance.
Do you know about other sources of pollution in the area that you're aware of or that you worry about?
I'm just sorry, just give me 1 second.
Refocus.
We don't know, I think. I don't know. Again, I'm sure there are probably many, but we do not know. When I met my husband, he was stationed at Fort Detrick, which is now and he was in the Chemical Corps, which I now call the Evil Corps, because it was chemical, radiological, and bacteriological warfare. And no one knew, no one in Frederick, that's where I went to school at Hood, no one there knew what was happening at Fort Detrick because this was during the war. That secrecy was very well maintained. And I know that we had a shortage of men at that time, and they set up a blind date bureau with men from Fort Detrick at that time at this girls' school for the dances, because so many of the young fellows were in the service and away. And so I put my name on the list, and I was too far down at the bottom of the list. So I didn't get a man that time for that dance. And I was very relieved because they all came, they were all these older guys, at least in their 40s, you know. I thought, who are these old guys coming at Fort Detrick? And some of them had uniforms on. One of them had a sailor suit, you know, with the bell bottoms, bald head. That's not nice, is it? But anyway, I never signed up for another blind date. But that's how I met Dave. He was a blind date, but someone got him for me. And he never talked about his work. I took him to a dance. Someone got me this date, and the next day, he being very polite, he always is very polite, invited me to go to breakfast the next morning at the hotel downtown, which was wonderful food. So he said he and his friends would pick me up. And he picked me up with a car full of men, some married, some older. All of them, not one man talked about his work. And I thought, isn't that odd? Men usually talk something about their work. And we all went out for breakfast. And every Sunday morning after that, I would go out to breakfast with these scientists. And The Hot Zone was a popular book written recently about Fort Detrick. So it's still active down there.
Mrs. Maxwell, the microphone is slipping again, and
Oh,
the belt.
I'll tell you, I'm skinny.
The belt. I'm sorry. Maybe you could just raise it up a tiny bit.
No, I'll pin it on my
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, but can you tell him the next?
Yeah, Chris has some questions. But
Okay.
You can bet is there any other public debate?
Or any kind of public discussion about the issue, or why not? Do people just not know very much about it, or just whatever?
So here's a question I just thought of. Around the time when 3 Island was being built, was there any kind of public debate or discussion about?
There probably were meetings in all of the surrounding communities. I didn't go to those. I went to the one in Londonderry, but most of the time the discussion had to do with all of the advantages of nuclear power, and how it would bring jobs, give jobs to people. Financially, it has been rewarding to the township because they collect a tax from everybody who works there. So in that sense, it has been financially good. But that was the emphasis, was on that sort of thing. And nuclear power was supposed to be the newer thing at that time. I mean, this was to be the new way of providing electricity that would be better than coal. And so I think people were receptive, for the most part, to this, and didn't seem to be overly concerned about it. That's the nearest that I can recall. But I was very busy then, and maybe I didn't pay as much attention to that as I should have.